issue why the Bucks couldn't trade him through the regular season, because now y'all got to trade a deuce, and in Milwaukee he had a third brother on the team. Y'all got to trade 3 people. That's tough.
Within 24 hours of trading Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Miami Heat, the Milwaukee Bucks did something that shocked everyone paying attention. They cut both his brothers, not gradually, not over time, gone, waived, cut loose the moment the leverage protecting them disappeared. But here's what makes this story matter beyond just roster moves: it's a confession. For years, the Bucks bent their entire organization around keeping a superstar happy. Coaches complained. Front office executives questioned it privately. Analysts pointed at it publicly. And the organization ignored every single warning sign until the relationship completely collapsed. What happened next revealed exactly what everyone had been suspecting all along. This isn't just a story about basketball. It's a story about power, family, and how far an organization will go to keep one man content. And when he finally left, it all came crashing down in 24 hours. The speed matters. That's the entire story right there. On June 22, 2026, Giannis Antetokounmpo boarded a plane to Miami as a member of the Heat. By June 23, both Kostas and Alex Antetokounmpo were gone from the organization. Not in the coming weeks. Not after a transition period where the new front office evaluated the roster. Within a single day, the Milwaukee Bucks severed every family connection that had defined their organization for years. Kostas had his contract expire and was immediately waived. Alex signed to a 2-way deal just 8 months earlier. A deal that required cutting a 3-year NBA veteran was released without hesitation. The brothers were out. No ceremony, no gratitude for what they'd contributed, just gone. Sports media immediately understood what that timeline actually meant. It wasn't a basketball decision delayed by logistics. It was a confession made in real time. Every executive, every coach, every front office member who had quietly questioned the arrangement suddenly had permission to speak. The media coverage was immediate and pointed. One viral post from a popular NBA account simply read, "Bucks waived all the remaining Antetokounmpo brothers." The laughing emojis that followed captured exactly what insiders had been thinking for years. This proved it. Everything the critics had said was true. Those roster spots were never about basketball, they were about accommodation. And the moment accommodation became unnecessary, those spots evaporated faster than anyone expected. To understand how Milwaukee got here, you need to understand where Giannis came from. He wasn't born into opportunity. He wasn't drafted into a family with connections and safety nets. Giannis Antetokounmpo was born in Athens, Greece to Nigerian immigrant parents who came to Europe searching for a better life and found something closer to a nightmare instead. The family lived stateless for years. No citizenship, no stability, no guarantee that tomorrow would be better than today. Giannis and his brothers sold trinkets and watches on the streets of Athens. They hustled just to help keep the family alive. That's not metaphorical struggle, that's the actual foundation his life was built on. Basketball became his escape, but it became something much bigger than that pretty quickly. It became his family's only viable path out of everything they were fighting through. When Giannis made it, when he finally broke through, the weight of that reality never left him. He understood something that most elite athletes never have to think about. His success wasn't just about him. It was about all of them. In every interview, every press conference, every public moment, Giannis made this clear. Family wasn't a side note to his career, it was the reason for it. He spoke constantly about the streets of Athens, about the uncertainty, about the guilt of making it to the NBA when his family was still struggling. That guilt was real, that love was real. And when he finally had the power to change things for his brothers, he intended to use it.
Before going further, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to smash that subscribe button. It really helps us keep bringing you the content you love. Share this video with your friends so they don't miss out on all the drama and excitement.
The Milwaukee Bucks selected Giannis with the 15th overall pick in 2013. He was raw, unpolished, barely 200 pounds with almost no meaningful professional experience. Most franchises passed on him. Milwaukee gambled on potential, and that gamble produced one of the greatest development arcs in basketball history. By the 2018-19 season, Giannis had become a force unlike anything the league had seen. A 611-point forward who could initiate offense, switch onto every defender, and impose physicality on every single possession. He won his first MVP that season. Then he won another the next year. Then he won Defensive Player of the Year in the same season, becoming only the third player in NBA history to accomplish that feat, joining Michael Jordan and Hakeem Olajuwon. In 2021, he delivered Milwaukee their first championship since 1971, averaging 35.2 points in the finals and winning MVP. Then he signed a Supermax extension worth approximately $228 million out of loyalty to a franchise he could have left at any moment. He was the franchise. He had become the kind of player who doesn't just influence decisions, he shapes them, and that power extended directly to his family. This is where the story gets uncomfortable because what happened next revealed the limits of how far an organization will actually go to keep a superstar satisfied. The question the Bucks never answered publicly, and the one that became impossible to ignore, was simple. How much did that accommodation actually cost them as a basketball organization? Here's what most people understood but nobody in Milwaukee wanted to say out loud. Kostas Antetokounmpo spent 6 seasons with the Bucks, 6 full seasons. Across all of that time he averaged exactly 2.4 points per game. Not a down year, not a slump. A career average of 2.4 points per game. Think about that number for a second. That's not a meaningful contributor to a championship contender. That's barely a presence on the court. His minutes were limited. His offensive impact was essentially non-existent. The statistical argument for his roster spot didn't really exist. What his advocates always pointed to instead were the intangibles. The energy, the defensive intensity in practice, the locker room presence, the way he impacted Giannis personally, and those things were real. Teammates consistently praised him. He was well-liked. He celebrated the 2021 championship alongside his brother in a moment that was genuinely moving. But here's the problem nobody wanted to confront directly. The NBA doesn't hand out guaranteed roster spots for intangibles. An NBA roster carries 15 players. Every single spot from the 12th man through the 15th represents a real decision about competitive value. Who gives your team the best marginal chance when things collapse late in a playoff game? That's what those spots actually mean. Veteran minimum contracts range from roughly $1 million to nearly $3 million annually depending on years of service. The financial cost was manageable. The opportunity cost was the problem. That roster spot could have gone to a three-point specialist, a switchable defender, a developmental prospect with legitimate upside. Instead, for 6 consecutive seasons, it was occupied by a player averaging 2.4 points per game. 6 years of front office decisions made with one eye on basketball merit, and the other on what it would mean to move on from the franchise player's brother. The Bucks made first-round exits. They lost in the Eastern Conference Finals. There were stretches where the supporting cast around Giannis was clearly insufficient, and fans and analysts pointed directly at roster construction as a contributing factor. Whether Kostas specifically was the deciding variable is impossible to prove. What isn't impossible to see is that accommodation shaped how Milwaukee approached personnel decisions for years. Doc Rivers took over as head coach during a turbulent stretch, and he was reportedly among those inside the organization who grew frustrated with the arrangement. Sources close to the situation described internal friction, not over basketball philosophy, not over specific tactical decisions, over the sense that the organization was bowing too completely to its star. Ownership seemed to be prioritizing a relationship with Giannis over the kind of roster construction decisions that actually give a team its best chance to compete. Rivers was vocal about this frustration according to league sources. He wasn't alone. Coaches openly questioned whether keeping 2 active roster spots effectively reserved for family members was compatible with building a championship-caliber team around a generational talent who deserved better supporting infrastructure. This wasn't one coach's opinion. It was a pattern. Rivers wasn't the first coach to navigate this dynamic. His predecessor Adrian Griffin had been hired ahead of the 2023-24 season, and was fired before reaching the midpoint of that year. One of the more jarring coaching dismissals in recent league memory. Mike Budenholzer had coached the 2021 championship team and departed after that run. The coaches who followed inherited not just an aging roster but an organizational culture where the boundaries of what could be challenged were shaped entirely by the relationship with Giannis. The family roster situation was one expression of that culture, and it never fundamentally changed regardless of who was standing on the sideline. Multiple coaching regimes, multiple attempts to reshape things, none of it mattered because the accommodation came from ownership, not from the coaching staff. That tension never became a public confrontation while Giannis was still there, but it was there. It built across multiple seasons and multiple regime changes until the relationship itself began to crack. Then came Alex. In April 2026, the Milwaukee Bucks signed Alex Antetokounmpo to a 2-way contract, making him the 3rd brother to suit up on the same NBA roster simultaneously. To make this happen, they waived a 3-year NBA veteran, a player with an actual professional track record, a player who had proven he could contribute at this level. Gone. To make room for Alex, who stood around 68, had played professionally in Lithuania, Montenegro, and Greece, and whose most notable qualification was his last name. The move immediately generated the kind of commentary the organization should have expected because it was the most transparent example of accommodation anyone had witnessed. 3 brothers on the same NBA roster simultaneously, one a 2-time MVP and champion, one averaging 2.4 points per game across 6 seasons, one making his NBA debut via a mid-season two-way signing that required cutting a more qualified player. This wasn't a basketball story anymore. It was a story about family leverage at its most visible and most direct. Reports indicated that the organization even allowed Giannis's personal skills coach to travel on the team plane, a concession that itself became a symbol of how far the Bucks were willing to go to keep their franchise player content. Think about that for a second. A personal trainer on a professional basketball team's plane. That's not standard operating procedure. That's accommodation taken to a level most organizations would never consider. The front office made each of these decisions anyway, one after another across multiple seasons and multiple coaching changes. Because when Giannis Antetokounmpo wanted something in Milwaukee, the organization had spent years demonstrating that it would find a way to provide it. No matter how much it stretched credibility, no matter how much it frustrated the coaching staff, no matter what it cost in terms of roster flexibility, the answer was always yes. The 2025-26 season was a disaster by every measurable standard. The Bucks finished 32-50 and missed the playoffs entirely. An organization that had built its entire identity around winning couldn't win anymore. The internal environment deteriorated in ways that went far beyond the losing record. Giannis suffered injuries during the year, and as the season became unrecoverable, the front office made a decision to shut him down. A call that carried serious financial consequences for Giannis personally, costing him a significant contract bonus tied to games played. He was supposed to hit certain thresholds and earn that money. Instead, the organization told him to sit, to rest, to stop playing. Furious, not privately frustrated, furious. According to multiple reports, he went completely dark on the organization. He ghosted the front office entirely. He refused to answer calls from team executives. He would not allow team doctors to monitor his training or his recovery. The relationship between the franchise and the man who had been its entire identity for over a decade had reached complete breakdown. Everyone inside the league understood what that meant. It meant he was gone. It meant the era was finished. It meant Milwaukee's window had closed. This was the same player who had signed that $228 million Supermax extension out of loyalty when he could have left. The same player who had repeatedly spoken in public about his commitment to the city and the franchise. The same player whose personal skills coach was allowed to travel on the team plane. When that relationship finally broke, it broke completely. There was no negotiation, no attempt to repair things, just silence. Just a superstar who had given everything to one organization, who had brought family into the fold at his own insistence, suddenly cutting off all communication the moment things got difficult. Knowing Giannis would not sign an extension under any circumstances, knowing the era had ended completely, the Bucks made their move on the eve of the 2026 NBA draft. On June 22, 2026, they traded Giannis Antetokounmpo to the Miami Heat. The package Milwaukee received included a significant haul of young players and draft picks, the kind of return that signals a franchise accepting a full rebuild rather than trying to salvage what remained. New head coach Taylor Jenkins was brought in to lead that rebuild from the ground up. The Giannis era was officially over, and within 24 hours so was the Antetokounmpo family's time in Milwaukee. The speed of what happened next was the story. Not eventually, not after some transitional period where the new regime could evaluate things. Within a single day of the trade being finalized, both brothers were gone. The organization that had bent its roster construction to accommodate this family for multiple seasons. The organization that had waived a 3-year veteran to sign Alex just 8 months earlier. The organization that had allowed a personal skills coach on a team plane. The organization that had absorbed years of internal friction from coaching staffs who questioned the arrangement, made both moves almost simultaneously the moment the leverage was gone. Under Taylor Jenkins, in a front office now committed to rebuilding around young talent and the draft assets acquired in the Giannis trade, there was simply no argument remaining for keeping either brother. The leverage that had protected those spots disappeared the moment the trade was agreed upon. And so did the spots themselves. That timeline wasn't an analyst argument. It was a confession written in real time. Sports media covered the departures with the kind of pointed commentary that had been building for years. The Athletic, ESPN, national NBA coverage. Everyone addressed the optics directly because the optics couldn't be ignored. 2 roster spots held for years under circumstances that many observers considered driven by star accommodation were vacated within 24 hours of the star's departure. Ramona Shelburne of ESPN reported that it wasn't expected the Heat would be adding Giannis's brothers to their roster. Formal language on what insiders had already been saying privately. Pat Riley does not hand out complimentary roster spots. That was how one source described the Miami organization's thinking. Yahoo Sports noted that many fans around the NBA had felt strongly about the family arrangement for years and saw the immediate cuts as confirmation of what they'd always suspected. The viral Facebook post from a popular NBA commentary account was simple: Bucks waived all the remaining Antetokounmpo brothers. The laugh react emoji count was in the thousands. That's what everyone was thinking. That's what the speed of those cuts actually communicated. Sports Illustrated had covered the Alex signing back in October 2025 under the headline "Bucks cutting ties with three-year veteran to sign Giannis' brother," a headline that captured the zero-sum nature of their roster decision as clearly as anything written about it. A player with 3 years of NBA service was waived to make room for a two-way signing whose most notable qualification was his last name. That story didn't generate much national attention at the time. In the context of what happened 8 months later, it became part of a narrative that had been writing itself for longer than most people realized. The media had connected the dots. The organization had just proven what everyone suspected. Milwaukee's situation wasn't invented in Milwaukee. Superstar influence over organizational decisions exists across the entire league. LeBron James's documented input over roster construction in Cleveland, Miami, and Los Angeles is the most referenced example in modern basketball history. He influenced who was traded for, who was signed, which coaches stayed and which coaches left. Kevin Durant's organizational influence in Brooklyn and Phoenix was reported extensively by credible outlets. Kawhi Leonard shaped coaching and medical staff decisions in both San Antonio and Toronto. Chris Paul's influence over personnel in Oklahoma City and Phoenix generated significant commentary from executives and scouts who spoke anonymously about how franchise players reshape organizations around their preferences. The difference in Milwaukee was directness and sustained visibility. Other forms of superstar influence involve preferred teammates with legitimate basketball credentials or coaching choices that carry at least some professional justification beyond personal preference. LeBron wanted shooters around him. Durant wanted playmakers. Those requests had basketball logic attached to them. Placing family members on a roster and keeping them there for years through multiple coaching regimes and multiple missed postseason opportunities was a different category of accommodation entirely. Hundreds of players with comparable basketball profiles to Kostas Antetokounmpo have never received a single guaranteed NBA roster day. Some spent those exact 6 seasons grinding 10-day deals and league contracts hopping for a call that never came. The question of what those players deserved, the ones who lacked the leverage of a famous last name, rarely gets raised at volume because the league prefers to manage superstar relationships quietly and avoid the uncomfortable conversation underneath them. Milwaukee managed theirs publicly for years until the relationship collapsed and management was no longer necessary or possible. What makes this story emotionally complicated, and what gets lost when the conversation focuses entirely on roster politics, is that the love driving Giannis' decisions was genuine. This wasn't calculated. This wasn't a superstar manufacturing narrative for public relations purposes. Giannis Antetokounmpo came from a family that sold goods on the streets of Athens to survive. He made it to the NBA against odds that most people cannot fully appreciate. And when he got there, he wanted to bring his brothers with him. He spoke publicly and repeatedly about the bond that had carried the family through poverty and displacement. He talked about guilt, about the weight of having made it while others who had been through everything with him were still fighting for opportunities. That impulse is human. It is understandable. In isolation, it is even admirable. The problem was that it played out inside a professional sports organization trying to compete at the highest level in one of the most competitive leagues on the planet. Every roster spot that went to a brother with a career average of 2.4 points per game was a spot that did not go to a player who might have pushed the Bucks further in the postseason. Every season that Alex occupied a two-way slot was a developmental opportunity that another prospect did not receive. The coaches who watched this unfold understood that superstar accommodation has limits and that Milwaukee had exceeded those limits in ways that became increasingly difficult to justify on basketball grounds alone. The personal skills coach traveling on the team plane was one data point. The 6 seasons of Kostas was another. The mid-season Alex signing was the third and perhaps the most transparent of all. But here's what matters underneath all of this. Giannis never asked for the organization to be poorly constructed. He never demanded they make bad basketball decisions. He just wanted his brothers taken care of. And the organization could have found a way to do that without bending so completely. They could have set boundaries. They could have said no to certain requests. They could have managed the relationship differently. Instead, they said yes to everything and then acted shocked when the speed of the cuts exposed exactly how those roster spots had been filled. Kostas remains a free agent. His NBA future is genuinely uncertain. He is well liked by everyone who played alongside him. His leadership qualities are not manufactured. Teammates across multiple seasons consistently spoke about his value in the locker room and his daily competitive intensity. But the statistical reality of his career and his age make a return to a guaranteed NBA roster spot a difficult case to make to any front office evaluating him on basketball merit alone. Without the organizational relationship that sustained his Milwaukee tenure, without Giannis's leverage protecting him, the argument for keeping him becomes very thin very quickly. Reports suggest the Miami Heat evaluated him in free agency but chose not to add him. That reinforces that the family accommodation was a Milwaukee-specific arrangement rather than something Giannis could simply transport to his new franchise. Pat Riley's organization operates under different standards. A return to European competition, where his 2021 championship ring and professional reputation carry real weight independent of his brother's shadow, may represent the most realistic path to a productive next chapter. Coaching and player development remain long-term possibilities for someone with his locker room credibility and his first-hand understanding of what competing at the NBA level actually demands. Alex has a different timeline and a genuinely different challenge. He is younger, his game is still developing. The Greek Basketball League gives him something that his brief, complicated time in Milwaukee never fully provided: meaningful minutes in a featured role, an environment where his performance is the only thing being evaluated, the freedom to build a professional identity that belongs entirely to him rather than existing in his brother's shadow. Prometheus Patras has competed at the Euro Cup level and offers a legitimate platform for continued development. His story is not finished. It is in a real sense just starting in a place where the Antetokounmpo name represents a legacy to honor rather than a standard to justify, where the question of whether he deserves to be there will finally be answered by the only thing that should ever answer it: what he does on the court. Now the Bucks begin again. Taylor Jenkins inherits a roster with genuine cap flexibility, a significant collection of draft assets from the Giannis trade, and no more family entanglements complicating personnel decisions at the margins. The organizational philosophy under Jenkins will be built around player development, youth, and the kind of merit-based roster construction that the Giannis era made consistently difficult. Whether the years of accommodation materially cost Milwaukee postseason success they might have achieved with different roster decisions is a debate without a clean resolution. Championship windows involve too many variables for any single factor to bear complete responsibility. The Bucks won a championship in 2021 with Kostas on the roster. They also finished 32-50 and missed the playoffs in 2025-26 with the most accommodated roster construction in recent franchise memory. Both of those things are true simultaneously. Neither one settles the argument on its own. What is not subject to debate is the sequence of events and what it reveals. The Bucks spent years finding reasons to keep the Antetokounmpo brothers employed. They waived a 3-year NBA veteran to sign Alex to a 2-way deal. They allowed a personal skills coach to travel on the team plane. They absorbed the coaching staff's frustrations and the public commentary about nepotism without changing anything fundamental about how they operated. And then within 24 hours of Giannis being traded on June 22, 2026, both brothers were gone. Not after a transition period. Not after a deliberate organizational evaluation. Within a single day. That timeline is not an analyst argument. It is a confession. The organization made the case for every critic who had ever questioned the favoritism, and it made the case faster and more clearly than any outside voice ever could. When a franchise hands out roster spots to keep a superstar happy, who is actually responsible? The player who asked? The brothers who accepted? Or the organization that said yes every single time? This is a conversation the NBA is going to keep having long after Milwaukee has moved on. Every franchise with a superstar faces some version of the same question about where accommodation ends and compromise begins. Milwaukee just gave us the most visible, most documented, and most personally complicated example of what happens when the superstar leaves, and the organization finally gets to answer that question entirely on its own terms. What Milwaukee builds under Taylor Jenkins. What Giannis builds in Miami, whether Kostas and Alex carve out identities of their own away from his shadow. All of it is worth watching closely because this story isn't finished. It's just entering a new chapter.